Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Place Northwest's Meet the Authorities event. I'm Paul Unger, publisher of Place Northwest. I'll be chairing this morning's event. This is actually our last conference of 2020, and it's set to be a real Christmas cracker for you. We do have another event left. Tomorrow we have 2 hours of pure networking fun on this wonderful Remo platform, where we'll bring the best in online networking to you from 2 till 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Come along, it's free to attend tomorrow. Details on the website as usual. Bring your own beer or optional mulled wine and party hats. On to today, it's a fascinating subject, the interface between private sector developers and local authorities. I think this is an area that will really be the test of success or failure for a lot of places as we go through the stages of economic recovery in the next couple of years. Thank you to those who've already submitted questions ahead of today. It's not too late to join in. Please ask questions in the Q&A bar to the right, and I'll get to those during the panels. I'd like to thank our wonderful sponsors today, 360, Waterman, Telcom and DAC Beechcroft. Check out their areas in the other room, click on their logos. And okay, we've got a great lineup for you today to explore what's going on in public-private partnerships and the work between authorities and developers. There'll be two halves with a presentation and panel in the first half, and then networking at half time, and then we'll come back for the second panel. So let's get started. First up, we have a presentation on the power of social value from John Bowker. Hi, John, of Stockport Homes Group. I'll hand over to you and check that your slides pop up, and then I'll pop out.
Yes, so it really is a privilege to speak to you this morning to talk around the power of CSR in successful public-private relationships. It really is a privilege considering when you see who we've got on the panel this morning. It's certainly hard not to feel like a warm-up act when we've got the likes of Tim Heatley ready to speak to you, but we'll give it our best shot. So I've got 5 to 10 minutes just to talk through our story at Stockport Homes Group with regards to CSR and our approach to CSR as a business, and hopefully give you some thoughts to go away with in terms of your business and your approach to CSR. So who are we then? Stockport Homes Group, it's a group of companies that's been established with a mission of being one team to transform the lives of those individuals within Stockport, within the borough. The first company within the group is Stockport Homes Limited, which is an arm's length management organisation owned by Stockport Council, and we were established in 2005 to manage the council's 11,500 properties and neighbourhoods across Stockport. It soon became apparent that we were far more than a landlord, and we wanted to do more to really help to transform the lives of the individuals within Stockport. So in order to do this, we established our group structure to what is known as today. So in 2016, the group structure was formed, and within the group, we have now 3 other subsidiary companies. The first of which is Viaduct Housing Partnership, which is a partnership with the council. And through Viaduct, we develop around 200 to 300 homes a year, new homes for a mix of tenure, for social rent, affordable rent, shared ownership, and we've just started doing some outright sale. So that's a real successful part of our company. And then 360, which I'll major on today, because this is all around private and public partnerships, and 360 was set up as a construction trading arm, as a private company within Stockport Homes Group. We used to give out most of our capital works, which is roughly around £18 million a year, to external contractors. We thought, why should we do that when we could actually do the work ourselves and hopefully retain some of the profits for better use, which I'll go on to talk about. And then the final company within Stockport Homes Group is Foundation Stockport, and this is the newest part of our group structure, which is our charity. This was established in 2018 in order to enable us to do more for the disadvantaged individuals within Stockport and beyond. It was really difficult for us to tap into charitable funding as Stockport Homes Limited, so having a charity in our own right enables us to do that and do much more to support the individuals within Stockport. And then probably the newest part of our group structure is a sub-brand of 360 itself. Well, 360 has been established for 4 years now, mainly as a construction company carrying out, in the main, refurbishment works across Stockport and beyond. But we've also now established 360 Living. Now, 360 Living is a property management arm to 360. And within 360 Living, we'd already started to venture into the private rented sector, because we believe obviously there's issues with standards in the private rented sector, and certainly based on our performance as a social landlord, we truly believe that we can be the landlord of choice within Stockport, whether that be in the public or private sector. So those are now the two arms within 360. Well, that's our group structure. And I'm going to talk more around 360 now in terms of CSR. But what's our approach to CSR? This is our business model within 360, and we consider ourselves to be a profit for purpose organisation. And the first part of our model is to ensure that we empower staff and community through our CSR practices. And the main part of that is to ensure that we have an engaged and happy workforce. And the culture of the organisation is what we believe sets us apart. Because CSR for us is our business. It's not an add-on to our business. And as I'll explain now, it's everything that we're about. So in terms of our staff, we ensure we pay fairly. All our staff, even apprentices, are on the living wage. And we have attractive terms and conditions which has enabled us to attract the best staff and retain them. Engagement is key. Stockport Homes Group itself, you may know, became #1 in the Sunday Times Best Companies to Work For in terms of our approach to engagement. And 360 as a construction trading arm within the group also achieved 3-star status, which we believe for a construction company is really powerful, and that's what enables us to do the work that we do. So here we are, here's some of our roofing apprentices that have done great things for us. They actually had a real difficult start in life, and we've certainly helped them to achieve their aspiration. And in terms of our employment, we major on local employment. We do a lot of work with the disadvantaged individuals that are most removed from the labour market. So in terms of our approach to CSR. And then the next part of our model is the actual work that we deliver. So as a construction management service, and we spend a lot of time on the work that we do to regenerate our communities. Here's some examples of the work that we do. The bottom 2 pictures here, bottom right, if anyone knows Stockport, one of the key estates within Stockport's Offerton. And over the past 2 years, we've been undertaking master planning work within Offerton and making a real difference in this community. Here we've done some new cladding. It's really energy efficient works. If you saw the before, it's quite striking in terms of the difference. Bottom left, we've converted a community centre. This is the Arthur Greenwood Centre in Bredbury. This was a real flagship scheme for us in terms of innovative design. And the top 2 are a new scheme which we've actually acquired, and which 360 Living is going to undertake the property management and the block management for this block. We've acquired this block and we're going to sell it for shared ownership. And 360 will be the manager of this block, undertaking all repair works, facilities management, and leasehold management work. 360 it's only been going 4 years, and it's grown from a fledgling company to with around £8 million turnover. We've got big aspiration to be a £20 million company within the next 3 to 5 years, and our approach to CSR is what we believe will set us apart. And then the third tier is around what happens with any profits that we make. So aside for the profits that are retained within the business to support business growth, any other profit is reinvested back into our charity, and that's where our group structure really comes into play. So our charity foundations receives gift aid from 360, so any profits, they don't line any shareholders' pockets or anything like that. It's reinvested back into foundations to support them in terms of the great work that they deliver. And the projects that they deliver are significant. I'm just going to highlight a couple here. In terms of the first one is furnishing our community. This is our furniture recycling scheme, which really help customers in most need when they set up their tenancies with us. Obviously, sustaining tenancies is key to what we do at Stockport Homes, and just giving customers a kickstart in terms of providing furniture which people donate to us, and recycling that back to customers has been a real success story, and really helped those customers in terms of sustaining tenancies. But that all comes at a cost. We obviously don't charge customers for this, so the work that 360 have done in terms of generating a profit helps to sustain this work, which is undertaken through foundations. And probably the pinnacle of the work that foundations do, this is a clip here from one of our pantries. So we launched Stockport Pantries a few years ago with our first scheme, and it's a subsidised food scheme which helps customers in most need. They pay, currently it's £3.50 a week, and with that they get to choose a range of food which goes far beyond the £3.50 a week. And this model has grown. We've now got 5 pantries across our stock and a mobile pantry, and the model itself has been replicated quite widely now across the sector. And during COVID times, because we had the pantries ready and set up, they were absolutely a lifeline to many customers who suddenly found themselves in the most need through no fault of their own, and they were really a lifeline to many. So as you can see, CSR isn't an add-on to our business. Everything that we do feeds back into the community, and that's really powerful for our operatives. And we really play a key role in making sure they know that that joiner fitting a door, what difference he's making. Yes, we want to make a positive impact on the built environment. Yes, we want to deliver quality work. And yes, we want to have high customer satisfaction, all of which we've been able to achieve. But even more importantly, that work that they're delivering is helping that customer to put food on the table, which shows that everyone benefits from the work that we're doing. So that's our model, and that's our approach to CSR, which I wanted to share with you this morning. So in terms of the future, just some closing points here in terms of what we can all pick up from positive CSR. CSR itself, doing good is good for business. I think ever more so now, social value is becoming a key measure and indicator in terms of winning new work. And we're certainly finding that our approach to CSR is standing us in good stead for tenders that are coming out now, because people want to work with businesses that have a real strong approach to CSR. And the success of public-private relationships is built on a shared desire and ethos. We've certainly found that absolutely at Stockport Homes Group. We are a public sector organisation. We are owned by the council, but obviously with a construction trading arm, we're also tapping into that private market, and providing that we've got that one mission, we believe that success can be achieved. And I think we can all learn in construction that we need to buck the trend of a race to the bottom in terms of procurement and price. I think the construction industry in the past has fallen foul of cheapest price wins, and cheapest price wins will never be able to achieve some of the real meaningful CSR that I've explained today. Having said that, real CSR need not always mean increased costs. Our business model doesn't lead to increased costs. It's about what we do with our profits. We believe that we can be competitive in any tender unless people are buying the work, which is what we've got to try and avoid, I should say. Positive culture, I've touched on that in terms of our employment and our practices. We certainly believe that the positive culture within the organisation does attract and retain the best talent, and getting feedback from our staff in terms of one of the things that make them proud to work for 360 and Stockport Homes Group is that they have the ability to give something back, and that's really powerful, and that's why our turnover is really low. Final point in terms of seeking out meaningful partnerships. Partnerships are always a more powerful way and a more successful way to achieve more, and that's certainly as we grow, we'll be seeking out more meaningful partnerships going forward. And if I could leave you with just one thought, my final bullet point here, and it's what we truly believe in at 360 and Stockport Homes Group, is can CSR become your business and not just be an add-on to your business, which is certainly the case for us. And that's everything I've got to present. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to the panel discussion now.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. Sharing screen. Here we go. Yeah, thank you for that wonderful insight. Social value is something we hear a lot about, and it's good to get some valuable examples of what it looks like in practice, which I'm sure everybody appreciated. If I can ask our first panelists to turn your cameras on, please, we will get underway. Good morning, everybody. We'll start with a quick round of introductions. So when I come to you, just please introduce yourselves, say who you are, where you're from, do, and we'll get the debate going. I'll start at the top on my view. Christopher.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Christopher. I head up the Planning and Environment team at DTH Beechcroft, and I particularly specialise in TPO, town centre regeneration, and the provision of housing, and we're currently advising on a range of repurposing matters and town and village greens. Garden villages, sorry.
Thank you. And Sean?
Hi everyone, I'm Sean Anstey. I think for purposes of today, I'm the chairman of Trafford Housing Trust. I'm very pleased to be with everybody.
Thank you. Tim?
Is that me? Sorry, Paul. Hello, I'm Tim Heatley. I'm co-founder of Capital and Centric. We're a social impact developer, and we spend about £2 million a week on regeneration.
Lovely. And Rebecca?
Thanks. I'm Becca Heron, Director of Economy and Skills for Wigan Council.
And if I start with you then, Becca, the sort of outlook as we come to the end of this extraordinary year, what your sort of priority list look like on your desk, and what is it that you're looking for?
Well, I mean, it has been a terrible year, hasn't it? Sort of the uncertainty as well as the impact that we've had. And being honest, yes, we have had to be much more responsive than I think we'd have liked to. I've been with Wigan for coming up for 3 years now, and we've worked really hard to put long-term plans in place for the economy, and particularly for our town centres. Obviously, we've been dealing with a pandemic, so we have had to sort of turn a lot of attention to that. But I would say that, you know, whilst we've reassessed our approach, we've revisited our strategy, I think actually what this pandemic has done is really emphasise the importance of it. So, you know, we've got an economic strategy that looks about diversifying the economy, supporting business growth, you know, preparing for sort of shifts in the type of employment that we'll see. COVID's accelerated a load of those trends. And similarly with our town centres, you know, we had far too much retail before, we still have, not dealt with it yet. But actually, again, COVID has accelerated and intensified those trends. So, you know, I think it's a really good example. Whilst we had to pause the procurement process to get a development partner for the galleries because we were all at that time sort of really stretched dealing with the pandemic, we restarted it as soon as we could, and we are absolutely progressing those plans along with any others. So we've maintained our dialogue with developers on key strategic sites. We really prioritised our future high street fund bid, for example. We're progressing plans for Lee Town Centre, and as I say, if anything, it's more urgent than ever now.
Yeah, absolutely. A great overview. Thank you very much. And Tim, as a developer that's got a good track record of working with local authorities, have you had to sort of change your strategy and your approach when it comes to sort of planning the year or two ahead because of this market?
I suppose it's been more of the same, I think, is what we're hoping that it'll be. So we've always had our city centre developments, which are less of a public-private partnership. They're more buying land and buildings unconditionally and bringing forward a hotel or you know, a couple of hundred apartments. But we've always enjoyed the public sector stuff as well. And the reason that we've done a lot of stuff in partnership with the public sector is we really like the outcomes that it creates, which is more than just a property outcome. Of course, they're looking for economic outcomes, social outcomes that are different to the traditional smash and grab developer outcome. And it just means you can do more interesting and exciting stuff. You can take a much longer term view, which means that, you know, you can think about how you deal with energy, you think about what you can do architecturally, and you can also do bigger projects at scale, and it's just more exciting. So so we'd like to do more of them. I think we probably will, and I think they're going to be increasingly important. I mean, you know, Becca made a great point there that, you know, it's a distraction when you have, you know, the public sector will have distractions, as will the private sector. You know, it could be an economic distraction that the private sector has. And the great thing about a partnership is that one can take a bit of pressure off the other, whilst, you know, the other partner's dealing with that particular example. And I think if you think about the economy as a whole, if you think that is a public-private sector partnership, you know, I know capitalists think that we're great at dealing with, you know, we're great at business and stuff, but when there's a problem, when there's a failure, we need the government to bail us out. And so we've got to forget, we can't forget that, you've got to remember that. And that can be the case as well in the development world, that, yeah, look, developers, we all think we're very clever, but the truth of the matter is, you know, we're developers, we're not magicians, and there's some things that just aren't simply viable or possible, or we're going to have economic shocks. And so if we've got an ambitious project, and if it's a long-term project, if it's a project at scale, or an amalgamation of projects that are complex, that create a larger project overall, then you're going to need to be able to ride that wave out. And what I love about the public-private sector partnerships is that you can take a real, you know, take a 10-year view and do exciting stuff. So for us, I think there's going to be more public-private sector partnerships in what we do. We'll still do the city centre stuff that isn't necessarily in partnership, because I think that they are to some extent a halo project, or they're a kind of like a flagship project that we learn and take ideas from, and that we then like to take to the suburbs, which is where more of our public-private sector partnerships are.
Yeah. And Sean, when you're speaking to your board at the moment, how are you trying to relay positive messages about keeping going when you know, things are perhaps difficult and there's different pressures on time and resource and pots of money out there? What are you saying?
Well, Paul, I think what we're saying, and for those who don't know, Trafford Housing Trust was acquired by L&Q Group last year. It's one of the country's largest housing associations, and ultimately that was to be done with an ambition to build 20,000 homes in the north of England over the next 10 to 15 years, to have £2 million a year into a Northwest Foundation, and to have investment into our existing stock across Trafford and elsewhere where we have homes. And ultimately, what we've sort of talked about at the board is that, you know, one of the things that we reflect on this year is that, you know, circumstances have changed, the external environment has changed, and therefore that means that the pace in which we do things may change, but what we want to achieve hasn't. And it's really, really important that when we, in my view, that when we set out the ambition to do what we want to do around development, around new homes, to fix the housing crisis in the north of England, that's an ambition undiminished, really, because that hasn't changed. The fact that people need homes hasn't changed. The fact that we need to get more affordable homes hasn't changed. And therefore our mission to be able to do this is more important than ever. So I think when you look at public-private partnerships, not just with local authorities, but with housing associations at the same time, you'll see them reset. I think you'll see more creativity in them. And I think what I've sort of said to all of our private sector partners is, look, we still want to do this. We might need to have a chat about risk and reward. We might need to see sort of how a deal is constructed. All of that stuff is fine. But ultimately, being really clearly focused on the end outcome will be part of the economic solution at the same time. Like, if we stop building, if we stop doing the things that we wanted to do, that is not going to help economic recovery. So these partnerships, THT doing what it needs to do, in my view, is central to economic recovery in future.
Yeah, thank you. And Christopher, if I come to you, you're at the coalface of a lot of deals when things are being done in town centres, large regeneration projects, some of the different types that you mentioned at the outset. What are you hearing from both sides of the people that you're working with? What's keeping your clients awake at night at the moment?
Well, a lot of them are trying to work out what are they going to do with the surfeit of retail space, and are they looking at repurposing that into either logistics or housing. And I see, all the other speakers have hit the nail on the head really with this. This has been a great accelerant, and basically both parties need to use the skills that they have and the tools that they have to deliver on this. And I'm particularly keen in terms of helping local authorities just use the tools that they have, particularly around compulsory purchase and their ability to perhaps borrow money on a longer term basis to facilitate development. And I think, there's a real opportunity here in terms of the town centres to change. We've got the planning white paper, that consultation's closed. It's a real opportunity to influence the government on that. You've still got the changes coming through with Class E that hasn't really been absorbed into the market yet. And then the consultation on turning that into housing. There's a huge amount going on, and I think everyone just needs to sit down and work together to work out what they want to do to deliver their houses. And there is no one answer. So, for example, I've worked on a couple of schemes where it's about delivering a hotel into a dilapidated building in a historic town, and other CPOs have been delivered around providing a theatre or a new civic centre and developing old town halls. So there is no one answer. You've just got to work on what each town has got and the skills, and develop those with both parties. Yeah.
And John, we're hearing a lot conversations I have with advisors and developers about registered providers, that they seem to be the flavour of the month at the moment. Is that because you've got more funding and you're better positioned than other people in terms of doing deals and making projects happen? Is that a fair comment? If you pop your mic back on, sorry.
Not quite that, Paul. I think certainly we're pleased that the new affordable housing program's been announced by government, and the funds that are available, which obviously is a sector we're relieved about, and certainly that focus on affordable housing is still a key priority for the government. So for us, that's good news. I think we're just trying to work through the detail and get more detail on how that will work in practice. And I think certainly in terms of how we collaborate as a sector is going to be absolutely key for us in terms of being able to deliver our aspirations. We've got big challenges ahead in terms of building safety, in terms of zero carbon, in terms of developing obviously new homes, and certainly how we can collaborate with the public and private sector is going to be key, and how as housing providers across GM we can do more. And we're already exploring opportunities to try and be more innovative with regards to modular construction as a collective, and with our bulk purchasing power. So certainly lots of challenges, but with that brings lots of opportunities for the sector.
Yeah, it's very interesting seeing innovation really accelerating this year, and modular seems to be getting its moment. Becca, when it comes to that sort of housing market, are you seeing a lot of redesigning going on? There's a lot of talk of the flight out of city centres and the rise of the suburbs, things like that. I mean, are town centres the new city centres?
Well, I do think it was quite fortuitous. We launched our economic strategy sort of over a year ago now, and our strapline was towns are the new cities. So it sort of, seems to have a certain resonance at the moment. I think what the pandemic has, it's made people reevaluate their relationship with place. So, You know, I actually live in Manchester, but you know, you don't need to be in the city centre every day to do your job. We've all learned that, and we all had to learn it very quickly. I think people are actually desperate to reconnect, and I think that there will be a return to the office. But I think maybe the nature of office working will change. People's commuting patterns will change, and that, I think, you know, introduces a degree of perhaps more choice about residential markets. So, I mean, Wigan's done very well in terms of its housing completions over the last couple of years. That's been maintained this year as well. But what we're trying to do is to, you know, we're working really hard to establish residential markets in our town centres, both Wigan and Leigh. I think, you know, Christopher made a good point about land ownership and CPO. In Wigan, we're really lucky because we own sort of a big 3.2 hectare site within the town centre. So, you know, it's not without its challenges in terms of viability and working to establish those markets, but we have more control over that. We've got other prime sites, you know, that are much more complex because we don't own the land. We've got a couple of great mills on the edge of Wigan town centre, huge potential for residential development, but very, very difficult issues in terms of ownership, value expectations. And we see similar issues in Leigh town centre, but both towns are really sustainable in terms of their location. They've got great access to some of the facilities that you might not have in city centres, you know, great schools, great healthcare facilities. So I think there are emerging markets there. We saw 8 homes down at the pier, you know, only 8. They went up remarkably quickly because they were built using modular methods, but demand for those has been really good, even in the middle of the pandemic. So, you know, we're working really hard with developers to improve the viability of those sites and make development a real possibility.
Yeah, and any of the other panelists got a view on redesigning? Tim, you've popped your mic on.
Yeah, I suppose I think much like Becker, I think we ended up in focusing on town centres a year or so ago. And it's almost, yeah, COVID has accelerated the movement away from town centres. But I think like Wigan and some of the other enlightened authorities, I know you've got Rochdale and Stockport and Bolton as well. And I think that they are, you know, there's a group of Northwest and Northern, and we're in the Midlands as well as stuff with some of our things. And actually, it's great to see those local authorities who get it and they see the opportunity in the town centres, which is, look, retail's dead, we need to change the high street, we need to change our town centre. And they've taken the brave decision often to go early and either to CPO or to release a strategic regeneration framework. I'm really excited by the plans that they've got at the galleries, for example. And I think that whole-scale demolition and redevelopment is going to be necessary in some locations. In others, it might be possible to nibble away at the edges and repurpose and reposition. But I think the challenge that all of our towns have got is that we're having to redefine a new residential ecosystem that doesn't exist. But that's a great opportunity. So I shouldn't move my bells jingle on as I move my arms pretty much. Sorry. I think we shouldn't. You know, what we need to do is, you know, we're thinking long term, I suppose, collectively. And the great opportunity is that there's no preconceptions to what these towns could be like. So in a sense, there's a blank sheet of paper so that we can create an entirely new place or an entirely new vibe or an entirely new community, I suppose, and create that value ourselves to make them viable. If you wind back in Manchester 30 years ago, it didn't have that, and it needed lots of central government support and grant and assistance in infrastructure and pure cash to create the culture and the community and the transport. And those towns are going to need that now. And so, you know, we should collectively be pushing government to assist us with that so that we can become a net contributor back to Manchester and the North. And I think that the landscape of the Northwest and in Greater Manchester, for example, in particular, is going to change rapidly. The city centre of Manchester has grown in height as it's got denser. But we know from talking to our occupiers in both residents and in businesses that they want to go to the suburbs, not because of COVID, actually, but because of the fact that they want access to green open space. So they want access to early years education, they want access to healthcare, they want access to things that the Manchester city centre can't do that well as a post-industrial city, but the towns can do brilliantly. So, you know, you've got the canals in Wigan, you've got the rivers in Stockport, and Rochdale. And so there's huge amenity that's available, and there's a great infrastructure that exists, and there's great character in these locations. So beautiful big old mill buildings, and some of which that we're privileged to be involved in the redevelopment of. And you can do them with critical mass and scale, so you can entirely shift the perception of a place because there's herd immunity, to use that phrase that's being used at the minute for a different reason. So, especially that younger generation who, essentially our town centres, the demographic that they catered for have died off. Literally, they've gotten very old. It was, these are post-Victorian town centres, and they've not changed. They've not evolved quick enough. And as soon as property stops evolving, then it goes backwards and becomes derelict. And so, so the future of those is to attract those people who have moved to Manchester for reasons probably for higher education. They have no preconception about what it's like to live in Bolton or Bury. They're here from Birmingham. But also increasingly, we know that people are moving to Manchester from Belgium or Berlin, to use all the Bs. So, as an international city, we're competing and we're punching well above our weight. And now our towns need to be able to offer a post-city centre environment. And that's an exceptional, I think, exciting opportunity to have people from all over Europe and beyond choosing Wigan as the town centre to live in, because it's cool, because it's got culture, because it's got character buildings, because it's got the canals, because it's got great green open space, and you can get into Manchester in about 15-20 minutes. And that is a really exciting proposition to people, because we know that when we speak to them, that they choose our city and the city region because of our, we're LGBT friendly, we've got equal access, got a great equal opportunities record, great human rights record, we've got a great business ecosystem, we've got affordable homes, and we are competing internationally. And so, I think as a group of, public sector and private sector organisations, we need to continue with that united voice to attract people, to make sure that we continue to punch well above our weight.
Well, amen to all that. Anybody want to add on the sort of redesigning and pick up on anything that Tim's put in that compelling case there?
Well, Paul, can I just quickly so one echo what Tim has said, but two, when we talk about redesign, we talk about viability. I think the three things that often happen when we don't get this right is you either get significantly higher densities than those which are needed, significantly poorer quality, or real pressure on affordable homes and social homes in those sites. So this viability point that Tim was sort of talking about is critical to how we sort of are able to make sure that we don't just throw up things that in 10 or 15 years time we're going to be really we're not going to be very proud of. And that's where I think housing associations, so John and Stockport, Untitled Chapter, we can have that discussion, I think, about how do you try and access Homes England funding and others, but what does it mean on our margins? What are we sort of aiming for, and how can we try and stimulate the market a little bit through what we sort of intervene to do? Because the absence of that, I think, like I said, it would be a huge mistake if in this push that we've seen Greater Manchester. It's a very legitimate push around using brownfield sites and so on. They are more difficult to do, and it will affect our ability to design schemes if we don't consciously choose to say that we're not going to accept poor quality, we're not just going to throw everything into them that we can, and we're not going to compromise on our affordable housing responsibilities, because I think that would be that would not be a good thing for the city region.
Yeah, Becca, you had your hand up as well before Sean came in.
Yeah, no, I was just going to build on something that Tim said, and actually links to what Sean said as well, which is I think that, we've called it place shaping for a while, but I think that quality of place and that need to really shape places has again been emphasised by the pandemic. So, we've all spent more time at home. So I think we've all valued much more our amenity space, our ability to get out, whether that's in a local park, whether it's in your own private amenity space, or whether it's shared. And I think quality of design, as Sean said, and quality of place is more important than ever. And I think people are really starting to value that in a way that they probably didn't when they were getting up every morning, going into the office, coming back at the end of the day when it's dark at this time of year, and, repeat. So as we're bringing forward our plans, we're looking at how places function as a whole and how the offer sits together as a attract people to come and live, work, visit our places within the borough.
Yeah, and Tim mentioned. Oh, John, did you want to?
I was just going to echo really what Sean said. I think certainly with this amount of investment coming into our towns, I think we just need to be careful that we don't lose sight of the affordable housing element, because it would be easy to price people out as towns become more and more cool to live in. I think certainly our responsibility to the affordable housing market is key. And I think just to add to that, in terms of CSR again, I think certainly with the investment that's coming in, we really need to think about how we can maximise the social impact that results from the work that we're delivering in terms of employment, in terms of engagement, in terms of those individuals that are most removed from the labour market. Can we use this investment to bring about real social and economic change as well as physical change?
Yeah, I think that's got to be the crux of it in terms of the public-private partnerships, is where you can do that. Isn't it? I think you can really take that. I think it's, I keep saying it, but it's a longer term view. You can essentially smooth off the viability gap over a longer period of time. So as you create value, you capture that value if you're taking a longer term view. And in doing so, you can create really high quality homes, really high quality product. Without necessarily having to charge a really high price for it. I mean, a lot of the locations that we're in, the challenge isn't affordable homes. Actually, it's actually trying to create higher value homes to attract people, higher earning people to live in their location, to spend in their local deli and cafe and so on. So it's a real difficult one. And the bit that I've never quite understood, and I can never get clear in my head, is when regeneration turns into gentrification, and when good becomes bad almost. So I suppose that's my job really, to try and get it from regeneration to gentrification, and then I'll take the ultimate flack as well once we achieve gentrification for gentrifying an area. But I think you're right. You can. I think we can. We've got to remember that affordable homes. We've got to remember all the constituent parts, and I think that's why those public-private sector partnerships just can be so powerful.
Yeah, we heard some mention already of funding and assistance coming down from central government. We had a question submitted in advance from Brian Sellers at Commonplace. Where are the panel on the various government funding initiatives, such as Towns Fund, the High Street funds that are out there, active travel funds, and how can private sector help authorities win more investment? Anybody want to? Yeah.
So for us, obviously, that funding support is crucial. And I think, at the moment, I'm particularly frustrated by delays in a decision on our future High Street fund. Lots of frustrating things about this fund. I think it's become quite confused about the difference between Towns Fund towns and future High Street funds towns, but we're working on the basis that we're a future High Street fund town. I mentioned before that we really prioritise progressing our bid right at the height of the pandemic, because obviously that investment is crucial. Bids have been in. I think ours went in at the end of May, before the deadline, and we're still waiting for a decision. So I was really disappointed not to hear anything as part of the spending review. When we emailed to sort of get an update, we were told, no, we're still on track to give you a decision this autumn, even though we're now in December. And that timely decision making is really, really important. We will progress our town centre strategy regardless. We will sort of look to all avenues for funding, whether that's Homes England, Heritage England, but timely decision making will really help, because what we're trying to do is blend investment. So from the council, from the development sector, but often it is central government money that will really make schemes viable and deliver, I think, the scale of change that will really sort of catalyse other developments in the area. So it's I think really frustrating at the moment how hard we are working to meet BCRs and all of that to get viable proposals, and then it goes into a bit of a black hole at the moment.
Paul, can I so I think two things to that. One, I think it's well known that government works on 12-month seasons. So in March we'll be in autumn still, I'm sure. Becca, sorry, but I think there is also, I think the clues in the question, there's sort of various government pots, and any funding is welcome, but that's where it sort of then becomes a challenge, because various government pots means various government bureaucracies to go through, which means various sort of delays in getting funding. And actually, the argument that was always made in Greater Manchester was if you empower local people to take decisions on funding, if you remove, even when the funding arrives, it arrives with restrictions on it, which then sort of constrains people's abilities to do something with it. And I think there is something about two things to that. One is, how do we get business and public sector voices in the Northwest in Greater Manchester continuing to make the case that we've always done, to say that actually we think that we can do this far more effectively. Funding is welcome, but if it's funding with strings, then that's not always well deployed, and doesn't generate value for money for the taxpayer. Actually, so if you're interested in value for money, then that's the point you should do. The second thing, we should really think really creatively about how can we try and grow our own funding locally. And so when we look at public sector, public-private partnerships, certainly at THT, we're in discussion on a number of sites around, this is not just about THT money or private sector money, but how can we spread the risk? What can we do creatively? How can we get sort of capital into these schemes so that we can do the things we said we want to do, which is actually deliver the schemes at the end of the day.
Yeah,
I think there's a great opportunity here for local authorities, in particular, once you've got a strong vision, to go and talk to the private sector and offer them a way to utilise their money. There's a continual, that I hear the whole time, that there's this wall of money wanting to invest, but the whole property market, real estate market, has been shaken up so significantly. People haven't worked out quite what sort of returns they're going to get or where they should invest at the moment. And I think we're acting on a whole range of public-private partnerships, which are joint ventures, LLPs, where local authorities have got into bed with a developer, and both can access different pots of funding and deliver a common vision. I just think there's a real opportunity to carry on with that. And I think it's just a question of having a dialogue and trying to be think innovatively, because at the moment, I think there's a lot of people, and you see this particularly in retail, who just think the model is broken, but they don't know how to change it. And I think, the town centres have a real opportunity here, because, where a city, particularly London and Manchester and Leeds, have focused and they don't have people living in the town centre, that funding has been displaced to the suburbs. And I think, people want a much more of the 20-minute, living like a campus thing, where there's a variety of uses in a given town. And I think that's the opportunity that people should develop.
Becca, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think that long-term sort of strategic plan is really important, actually, and it links back to the point that Sean made. So I think we're a long way off from getting the devolution of funding that we were seeking. I worked with Sean on devolution sort of all those years ago, back in 2014. But I think once you've got that coherent plan, that long-term vision, then you can look at sort of bringing the various funding streams together to deliver in an integrated way. And there are challenges at the moment, because all of those funds have their own bureaucracy. They're managed by different departments. It's quite hard to sort of bring them together in the blended way that we would really like to see. But I think as long as you've got your own clear plan and you can see how they fit together, behind the scenes, we're working and access the funding that will enable us to do it. And it's not easier, and hopefully it will become easier. But yes, private sector are really key to that as well, and are part of the dialogue.
Yeah, a good question. Picking up on the sort of amenity point from George Isles in the Q&A, please do join in at any time in there and put your questions. Around amenities such as schools and health centres, would putting those in first support higher open market sales prices, touching on a point Tim made, I guess, about the high value, the higher value for private developers, and allow more affordable homes to come in behind, I think, is the implication.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing in the market is right now is because there's a move away from the big funds, the big money, away from retail and away from offices. A lot of them are putting the money into either logistics or build to rent, because they're the two bits that they've seen people, they've seen demand continue to climb and grow. And so, and if you think about build to rent, there's almost like an amenity war on the go. So we know that from campus, where other big build to rent projects were, so build to rent in my mind being single ownership, and therefore, ongoing investment and management of the ownership. But our competitors for campus were kind of, in my mind, they were kind of almost hermetizing people by building things into the buildings themselves, like a cinema in the basement and I'm coming on to amenities, I promise. Cinema into the basement and an internal cafe for residents only and a residents only lounge and so on. And we had the opposite point of view at campus, which is, well, actually the interesting bit about our city is the people, really. It's that, different cultures and lifestyles and people almost bashing up against each other. And so we actually externalized all of our amenity and made it available to the public. And I think that's now, I think actually the build trend's caught up, and that's going to be the future. Actually, it's going to be kind of like more public spaces are the interesting spaces, and they're the amenities that people want. Whereas in cities, the amenities are kind of a bit more around a gym and a deli. In the suburbs, they're not. It's the health centres and the early years education schools, and so and with a drive towards build to rent in the suburbs, and that's going to go like Billy-O. It's going to be a huge expansion area for pension funds and developments. Developers generally, there's going to see a lot more build to rent in the suburbs, where you can create 300, 400, 500 homes at any one time, and you can price them sensibly and accordingly, and you can have energy efficient solutions because you've got an ownership life cycle of 20, 30 years. So they will then have to start to look at how they can provide those other amenities. And where we're doing it, we are looking at nurseries. We're also looking at providing some support to schools to improve their Ofsted results, to help with, to put even a management consultant into high schools, because we know that is directly linked to the value of homes in an area. Building gyms, building health facilities, building running tracks, opening a GP surgery. These are things that developers are going to increasingly need to get into in order to make the community right, in order to create that value. And so I think that's a good model. And again, you need scale and critical mass. Hence why the public-private sector partnerships are going to increase as a result.
Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else want to come in on that point? So it doesn't seem like something that private sector can do on its own, where there's a lot of other amenity, or whether it's health centres, schools, or things like extra care. Is there the appetite and the firepower on the public sector side to play its part in delivering those as well?
Well, Paul, just briefly, I think there has to be. The only point I would add to what Tim said is that, in some respects, this is also about confidence and restoring confidence in the sort of planning system. And so, this infrastructure debate, amenity debate, that sort of besets every single discussion around, where do we build it? Take Trafford Centre as an example. I mean, the Metrolink was promised to the Trafford Centre. It took 20 years to get there, for example. So there is something about how can you forward plan some of this sort of stuff, and could you use some of the money that's available from government and elsewhere to think a bit differently about how we apply that and get some of these amenities in place, because I think it will one hopefully help create value, but two would remove some of the reluctance to have homes in local areas because the amenities are there in the first place, and that would be a very wonderful outcome for everybody, as opposed to the debate that we normally have around where we build.
Yeah, absolutely. And a question on sort of financial models. So when we had the great financial crash 10 years ago, there was a lot of talk about innovation and new ways of financing things, and we're going to have to do things differently. And the big change that we've seen there really is the disappearance of the banks and the rise of private equity. Throw in the eye forward 10 years, what do you think, if any, that will be the big changes that we'll look back on as a result of this crisis that we're going to go through now, do you think?
I'd imagine I'll go first, because that's a tricky question. That I think that I'll get the easy answer out of the way. I think that the weight of money often sits in funds and institutions. It's where the public put their pension, essentially. That's where the vast weight of money in property comes from. Increasingly, pension funds need to demonstrate their social outcome, not just their, the consumer wants to see that their money is going to make a positive difference, in addition to just make a return back to them for when they retire. So there's going to be a lot more of that, I think, and therefore increasingly developers will have to have will have a social bias. It can't just be about the financial outcome; it has to be about the wider economic and social outcomes. So I can see that occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to get the crystal ball out? John, do you think things will be generally funded the way they are? Do you see a change in terms of sort of central government funding for affordable housing and registered providers?
I think the need for affordable housing is going to be even greater. I think certainly we're the safety net to many, and certainly if the impact on the economy is what everyone's anticipating, then there's going to be more individuals that are in need of that support and affordable housing. So I think certainly as a sector, we're ready to support those individuals, and obviously funding is going to be key. And building more homes, because the demand is obviously increasing, and it will do more so as a result of this.
Yeah. Chris, are you seeing that wall of money from the institutions around more socially minded projects come through to reality, or is that just sort of theorizing at the moment?
I don't think it is theorising at all. I mean, a lot of these institutions have big CSR obligations and are actually very keen to deliver on them, and that includes things like net zero and biodiversity gain. And these will be the drivers in terms of making sure that these commitments are delivered on. I mean, I sit on various committees where we talk about planning and environmental legal matters, and it's quite clear that a lot of the banks are really driving environmental compliance on a whole range of financing of projects. So, you know, all these big pension funds are instrumental, and other organisations are instrumental in delivering on this. And I actually think it resonates. I saw an interesting piece in one of the papers over the weekend in terms of how brands on the high street that didn't deliver what people want in terms of their CSR obligations have been left to wither and die, basically, whereas a lot of people now want their brands to reflect their aspirations. And I think, you know, the organizations that can reflect that and build upon it will be successful in the long term.
Yeah. And Becca, putting two and two together, can you see institutions directly investing in more council housing and direct, you know, house building from local authorities and partnering up in that way?
I think we're looking at different models to increase the supply of housing. Direct delivery program, not all local authorities do, and we've delivered a significant number of units ourselves over the last few years. Obviously, we're sort of capped by our HRA borrowing cap, but we're looking at sort of, you know, partnerships that may enable us to sort of take ownership of homes that have been delivered by the private sector. I think it was Sean that referenced it early in this discussion. You know, people will always need homes, and actually sort of coming out of the pandemic, I think that the demand for affordable housing is going to be stronger than ever. So we've got to look at ways of making sure that we've got a housing offer with the sort of variety that will meet, you know, different needs across the borough. And I think that, you know, private public partnerships, which obviously is the theme of this discussion, is really fundamental to that. And there are different ways to do it, different ways of delivering different parts of the offer.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it would be interesting to see how this this sort of subplot around sustainability plays out. You know, it was meant to be the year when that was really taken seriously, and obviously people have been distracted. And things that Chris mentions there, biodiversity gain, starting to come back in as people plan for next year and dust things off. No, that's brilliant. Thank you everybody for a great first session there, and plenty more to explore in our second panel after the break. And yeah, hat tip to Tim for the Christmas jumper. Last speaking appointment of the year, and I'll join you for the end of this session with the gold guitar glasses. Keep you company for a few seconds. Please do pop on your cameras as we go back into the networking area and get around the tables and see your fellow attendees. I hope you enjoyed that first half, and we'll see you back here at 11:30. Thanks everyone. Jerry, nice to see you suited and booted. Thank you for making the effort.
I could do it. I think it's the first time I've worn a tie for many weeks.
Did you recognise it when you got it out of the wardrobe?
Yeah, I've got a big investment in ties, so I thought I'd get some use of them.
Good, nice on brand.
Do you remember how to tie a tie, Jerry?
Yeah, just about, yeah.
I think I'd fall over if I tried.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go once round the room, as it were, and just say who you are, where you're from, what you do. Jerry, we'll start with you as you're best dressed.
Thank you. Jerry Bruff, I'm the Director of Place at Bolton Council. What I do, well, mainly I drive forward the regeneration and development agenda within Bolton.
Wonderful. John?
John Laverick, Warrington and Co, part of Warrington Council, Head of Regen Development and Housing.
Thank you. Caroline?
Hi, Caroline Simpson, Deputy Chief Exec at Stockport Council, and I lead mainly on the place and regeneration agenda.
Thank you. And Peter?
Yes, good morning. Peter Moss, Deputy Lead at Preston City Council, Cabinet Member for Planning and Regulation, and my main job is to annoy council officers and the Chief Executive.
Okay, you can tell us how well or otherwise you annoy them as we go through. Yes, please do join in the audience. Please do get involved. You can use the Q&A box to the right to enter your questions, and I'll come to those during the discussion. Try not to use the general chat area because I'll forget to look at that, so use the Q&A one. Yeah, we heard a lot about funding and priorities and different sort of redesigning and things in the first panel, but let's start with a fundamental question from your perspective. So are you still investing? Have you still got the appetite and the firepower to do what you want, or have things frozen in the current situation? Caroline, I'll come to you. Tell us what your sort of outlook is.
So I think the straight answer is we're absolutely ploughing on. So right the way through the very difficult last 9 months, the council's still been investing in capital projects in regeneration. We've got some significant private investment that's progressing through planning. And so it feels to me, you know, and you can never, ever be complacent about this, but it does feel like there is that longer term continued confidence in Stockport as a place, and particularly around the town centre. And the council is absolutely continuing to back that. Councillors have been really clear right from the start that, you know, part of our recovery through COVID is about supporting our economy. Our economy has to be backed by continued regeneration, and never more so really in terms of the challenges that town centres are facing. I think what's happening at the moment is that restructuring in town centres in a more rapid way that's been coming and we've been kind of working with for many, many years. But it's just accelerated in the next 6 months, and our approach is, well, we've got to accelerate with it, and we've got to kind of keep going and keep that momentum. And if we keep that confidence as a council, then, you know, that will hopefully be matched by private sector confidence, and you know, so far that is looking to be the case. You know, I say that with you know, every day is a challenge, isn't it, at the moment? So it's not easy, but there's no let up from our side at all.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Jerry, would you echo that from the Bolton perspective? How are you seeing things at the moment?
It's probably slightly different because the council committed to invest £100 million in the town centre in 2017, the end of 2017. And I think as it stands, we've probably committed about 37 million of that. So we've still got a way to go, but we've been told that we're not getting any more, and we're not taking on any additional risk. As a council, we have a budget problem to deal with in the next year. Read about it in the newspapers, and so therefore there's I would say our appetite for risk has been severely reduced over the last 9 months. And as I say, our appetite to take on additional or investment or additional funding above that 100 million ceiling is not there anymore. So, you know, more constrained than possibly we might have expected going forward, but you know, we've still got a lot of leeway within the existing budget that we still to commit, and so that still gives us a bit of firepower, and reassured that all of our development partners seem to be, you know, resilient, committed, and nobody's hinted at slowing down or pulling out or anything like that. We're about to announce a deal with another development partner actually tonight, probably, and so yeah, we've just been going on as almost as normal, although I think with a bit more scrutiny of the numbers probably than might have been the case 9 months ago.
Yeah, understandably. And John, did you want to come back in there from Warrington and Co?
Yeah, as always with these things, and for a bit of balance, we find ourselves probably right in the middle of those two different views. Still very much committed to investment within the town centre, focused around regeneration, really following what is has been a massive investment for the council within Times Square. We're starting to see that bear fruit around it, really, which was always the intention. But in terms of out and out regeneration rather than income generating projects, still the appetite to do that. Some slight change in PWLB borrowing now, which refocuses on that, which is good. And we'll be looking to see how we can deal with some of those infrastructure placemaking problems that we find ourselves with, that can accommodate particularly residential and commercial office development around the town centre. We're starting to see quite a strong demand for office where it's close to Times Square. That seems to be quite attractive to people. So we've seen quite a lot of interest in that. So it's really how we help and develop that growing commercial market, really, for us.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, just explain briefly the change on the PWLB, what that stands for, and what the change is.
Sorry, just cut out there.
Sorry, John. On yeah, when you mentioned the change in the spending review on PWLB, just explain what that is for those that don't know.
So it's Public Works, Potential Works Loan Board is how we borrow money for schemes. To date, that's been widely used for investment as well as regeneration purposes. Revised rules really look at that. I think the percentage is lowered, so the cost of that money is lowered. But the rules on how you can apply it and what project you can apply it to have changed. Much more on regeneration type projects. So we'll be looking to see how we now balance that against private sector investment within the town, which is absolutely fine, dead right, exactly what we should be doing. And I think we're probably in quite a good place to do it. For the reason we have made those investments to date in the town centre. It's how we now knit all those other parcels together and how it works. Yeah. So particularly COVID-19 to one side for the moment, but certainly one of our ambitions with Warrington having so many problems related to traffic because of where it is, where it's geographically located. We wanted to really sort of rebalance the use of cycling and walking, relationship of green spaces to one another in the town centre, and the use of public transport. And I think that's really where our focus will start to go now, is making that environment much more attractive for private sector investment to come in. I was noting some of Tim Heatley's comments earlier on about having to put all these amenities into the development. Well, actually, if you get the spatial planning of the town right, and I know you can only do it on certain geographical areas, but if you get it right, those things should be there. They should be accessible. You know, you shouldn't have to have one in every sort of building, as it were. And I know different areas will have different requirements, but that's what we're trying to knit together now. So can someone live in the town centre? Can they get easy access to public transport? Can they walk? Can they cycle? can they work in the town?
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, give us the Preston viewpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, I mean, clearly in terms of the recovery, we're all coming from a very similar place to begin with, aren't we? We've all got the same problems, and none of us are going to be unique in those recovery terms. Hopefully, early on in the new year. I think if we go back to 2018, and Preston was given the title of the most improved city in the UK by PricewaterhouseCoopers report, and clearly, you know, we don't just want to be the third city in the northwest, as we're sometimes termed, because of course all that does is then makes us compete with the big boys in Manchester and Liverpool, and that's not what we're about. We're about wanting to be the best we possibly can for Preston, and you know, so not only were we the most improved then in 2018, but perhaps, you know, in terms of some of the things around the public realm that John talked around, and then around investment, it's around being the best for Preston, and you know, I am sometimes a little bit worried when I'm the only elected member on a panel speaking all morning, and I sometimes wonder why that is the case. But you know, we do want to, you know, if I can express that sort of the councillor's thing around personal and prejudicial interest, and my personal prejudicial interest is without doubt Preston, and that's, you know, and that's what we're about. And if we can make Preston a much more calm and more enjoyable place for people to be and want to be, and there's very often a phrase around town and city centres, and it's around, if you're 8 or 80 and you want to be in that place, then so does everybody else. And if those two demographics can be you know, tied in together, then clearly that's where we want to be, and everybody wants to be in that place. So it's around that, you know, how do you make that city much more enjoyable and much calmer and a much more enjoyable place to be. It's not going to be easy, you know, post-pandemic, but we will all be trying desperately to get there. And in terms of some of the land values in Preston, clearly we're getting to a stage now, as you've probably seen with some of the major developments that are coming on stream, that no longer is the surface car park providing value for money, but now those land values are such that we're able to start to make some real progress, and bring those investors in for that development, for those development purposes. And you know, with that comes more city centre living, supporting those shops and bars and restaurants that may not be the case always. So whilst we have got some of the big boys online, there's plenty of room for others to be joining in.
Yeah, and you mentioned about making the centre attractive. I think one of the interesting dynamics that's underway with changes to retail, what's happening to department stores that we're seeing in the headlines at the moment, is almost the reimagining of an anchor. And there's been some interesting pieces out from architects and planners about using culture and history and education, public squares, good Wi-Fi. You know, there's some great ideas out there for what constitutes an anchor. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, and is the onus on public or private sector to take the lead on that? So anybody want to have a stab at that one?
I'll start off. For my view anyway, for Warrington specifically, that sort of change from retail space, I mean, it's been happening for 7, 8, 9 years, and I think there has been a realization for most authorities that they've got to change that space and do something differently with it. I think what constitutes an anchor will change. So at the moment we're seeing, you know, lots of interest from restaurants. Weirdly, you would have thought they'd all, you know, packed up shop and waited till all this is blown over. Quite the opposite. Niche operators, somebody who's got a reinvented offer, something that will spark interest, they're doing really well, and that, I think, is what we'll see is much more or much more rapid change than what we've had previously. You know, previously town centres, retail, few restaurants, bit of leisure. I think you'll see if you don't have that evolution of what your town centre does in terms of offer and newness of offer, fresh ideas, fresh thinking, that's when I think they'll get stale. And I think the ability to accommodate that is actually, you know, a real challenge for me, and I'm sure it'll be the same with colleagues, is how do you do that? You know, not making truly bespoke spaces, but spaces that can be used for different things.
Yeah, Caroline, did you want to sort of add your thoughts to that, like the new anchor?
Yeah, and I was just going to also comment, Paul, on the view about open spaces, green space, public realm in town and city centres. There's absolutely no doubt there's a greater part to play. You know, we know that, don't we? Instinctively, we know that even more now with COVID. It is far easier to say than do, because, you know, we've got value in our town centres at the moment, and, you know, it is very difficult to convert what are currently valuable spaces commercially, or less so than they were, but still create some value, into public realm and parklands that not only cost to put in, cost to to take out the value in the land, but also cost to maintain. So I think it is absolutely crucial, and I do think councils have a vital role to play, because we are that custodians, we do have that long-term view, but doing it is really challenging. And you know, within Stockport, we've got planned for a 2-acre park that's currently we're plans to go on site on top of the new interchange next spring. And that is a massive investment into the town centre. It's transformational, that scale of new green space and public amenity. But that's taken some doing, and we've got lots of other space in our town centre that we need to do something with. And I think it's about which projects do you back, how do you create the value in these projects, and how do you make them really fit and last to meet the kind of the changing personalities of towns at the moment. So I think that it's absolutely right that has a massive role to play, and we as local government have a very big leadership and transformational role. But I think we all know on this panel, and many people in the conference, it is actually really challenging to deliver.
And how did you crack that then, having sort of gone through that to almost the stage of on site with a 2-acre park? How did you find value and make that work?
So a lot of public commitment. So it's backed by GMCA in terms of some equity investment. The council itself is got equity investment within it. We're using transport monies to build a bus station underneath the new park, and there will be a residential block on top of it, creating development value. So there's a whole range of it's a really complex project. But the kind of centerpiece is the new park, if you like, and the connection that new park will bring between the station and the town centre. So it's taken many years worth of work actually to get us to this stage, so I suppose, yes, I speak from kind of pain and experience on just what a challenge it is to bring all those ingredients together.
Yeah, Jerry, given how complex and challenging and long-term these things can be, do you think the private sector developers always understand the nature of trying to work with organizations that have politics at their heart, that have to take a long time over things? Oh, if you just pop your mic on, sorry.
I think the good developers understand that. But I do think there's a tendency amongst developers to look at the public sector as a homogeneous mass, and to regard all councils as being pretty much similar. And the reality of it is, although, as Peter said, we're all coming from the same place, we all actually have got completely different pressures on us, whether that be financial pressures, political pressures. I mean, we're in an administration which is a minority administration that depends on more than 3 or 4 parties getting together on every major vote. That it makes it really difficult to get major decisions through. The financial situation has changed, as I alluded to earlier, quite quickly over the last 9 to 10 months. Now every other council will be in a completely different position. They may have stacks of reserves. They may have a big majority of one party or the other, so they can get decisions made quite consistently. And that understanding that's who your partner is and that's the pressures that are on them is something that a good developer, as I say, will do. But a lot of them that I've spoken to just assume that they can speak to me, they can speak to Preston, they can speak to Stockport, and they're basically talking to the same kind of organisation, and yet we're all different. So I would say to any developers listening or any investors listening that if you are going to sit down and create a partnership with the council, you really need to understand the pressures that they have to work under and the changing nature of that relationship, because of course every year we have elections. So what might be the position this year might not be the position in next year. So getting an understanding of that position, if you like, of the partner is, I think, really critical to developing a resilient partnership, and one that that will see you through good times as well as bad times. And I guess we've been quite lucky, well, you make your own luck to a certain extent. We've been good at choosing the right partner, I think, and we've been a bit fortunate that the partners we've chosen have got that appreciation of our needs. So yeah, going back to your question, I don't think it's the case with all developers, but the good ones would understand that and would see that as a requirement.
Yeah, and Peter, is this sort of puzzle around the role, the purpose, the future anchors? Is this something that occupies you when you look at Preston?
Well, absolutely. Just picking up on what Jerry said there, actually, in terms of what developers and investors are looking for, and we're not all the same. Absolutely, and what we should be hoping for is that the tale of retail and how we all wanted the same city centres with the same shops and the same brands in. I'm sure everybody, both private and public sector, now appreciate that that's perhaps not the way forward. And we need to be looking more at independence. We need to be looking more at what makes a place distinctive. And if you guys at Bolton and Stockport in GM would forgive me, we see Preston as being distinctive from anywhere else. And I think that's really, really important in moving forward. And how those anchors, whether they are the retail or perhaps, more importantly, as perhaps people are aware of the Preston model and the anchors that we use in terms of what is already there within the city and how we work with them. And they are public sector in the main, but that's how we've tried to engage with them. And then, so for example, from that, you look at what's happened with the £200 million UCLAN University of Central Lancashire master plan, and they've used one of the big boys in terms of Balfour Beatty to do all their road and highways and public realm work. But only yesterday they announced that every single one of Balfour Beatty's subcontractors are positioned within 40 miles of Preston. So in that respect, it's using the big boys and bringing the big boys in, but at the same time having that ability to be flexible enough to use local suppliers, local tradesmen and all the rest of it to achieve that purpose ultimately for the good of Preston.
Yeah, there's like a new localism agenda now, isn't there? And that sort of chimes with purpose and social value and these sorts of things. Yeah, no, it's very, very interesting. We had a question submitted in advance that I want to bring in now from Ted McDougall at Seddon. A question about best value for money and procurement. So where two organizations want to work together, and sometimes you get this where they've already got a relationship, one private, one public body. How do the panel propose to resolve the regulatory requirement to prove value for money and openness without the obligation to competitively test the market and put it out to tender every time? It's an old conundrum. Are there any new solutions to it?
No, I think is the answer. I mean, there are ways to deal with the best value consideration, but very often, if you really want to stand behind a decision to go and do something, there has to be some serious evidence behind doing it. You can do the adjoining land principle for if it's a particular development, but that's not always the case. to not have tested the market is that's a real tricky challenge to me.
Yeah, Caroline.
Yeah, just to add, I agree. I think the principle of transparency and equality around councils and public resources and our local democratic responsibilities are just so central to how councils operate that it's very difficult to see, even in a more deregulated environment, how that principle can kind of move aside. I think, is there a balance of keeping that transparency without the rigor of open procurement? I don't see how. It is a real conundrum, but I think that accountability locally is absolutely essential.
Yeah, I think we can probably be smarter and more prescriptive, and it comes back to Caroline's point about leadership, about civic leadership. We can be smarter about how we explain what we want, so that you do sort of get fewer people bidding for something, if you like, or whether it's a site or whatever it happens to be, so that we're clear about what we want and people don't waste their time and they don't waste our time. So I think we can be clear about it, but it's not about trying to get rid of these rules. It's about just work with them. Just know you've got to do it. If you're going to engage with the public sector, you've got to do it. Factor it in. Just get better at doing it. And I've come from a private sector background. I used to be exactly the same. As soon as you get into the public sector, you realise, look, it's not really negotiable. Just deal with it. Factor it in and deal with it.
Okay, Jerry, you want to come in?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is we have used land sales to bring forward development. If you go down the private partnership, public-private partnership route, or the JV route, then you're into procurement. You really can't avoid it. But we have done, we've got into partnership with developers on the basis of a land option to buy. And if you keep it as a straightforward sales transaction, well, you're obviously not losing out. You're losing out on any future value that might be generated by that development. But you have to take the view that says, well, are you doing this for future financial gain, or are you doing this for the benefit of the town that you're working in, and are you happy to have a good development come forward without necessarily hanging in to get overage or whatever it might be? So we have done quite a number of deals on the basis of a option and then a land purchase agreement, and I think you don't have to get into the procurement basis in terms of choosing a partner for that, but you still eventually have to get into procurement business when it comes to procuring your construction contract. So it doesn't absolve you from going down open procurement, and indeed, as Peter says, we've got a system in Bolton also where we we would channel everybody into local suppliers as best we could. The other thing I would say is there are other models around. I mean, and we've got a number available to us as the council, and developers ought to realise that. So, for example, we have a joint venture LLP that was set up 10 years ago with a private sector development partner. We can do development through that LLP without necessarily going through a tender process because we are joint shareholders in that company. We have a framework contract that we've got with AECOM and Robertson's Group, where we can tender many competitions among 5 tier 1 contractors. So we don't have to go to an open market tender. If we wanted to build something, we go through that framework. And we've also got a joint venture with all the RPs in Bolton, which we set up 22 years ago, believe it or not. And that's a joint venture company where we've got 8 RPs in the council and the community and voluntary sector actually acting as partners in that company, and I'm on the board of that company. So again, if we go through that company to get projects done, that does mean that we're not tendering at the kind of first stage, but you obviously want to tender when you get to contract. So there are quite a number of mechanisms that councils will have available to themselves and will have used in the past. Developers or investors shouldn't necessarily think that there's only one way of doing things. I think there are different ways of doing things, but it often depends on the history of that council and what they've done in the past and whether they've set up these organisations, because we wouldn't want to go and set these all up now just to deliver a project. But the fact that they're there and they've used them in the past, makes it, for us, probably gives us a wide variety of approaches that we can take. which again might be more of a variety than some other councils might have available to themselves. So that's coming back to my point about understanding who you're dealing with and what their their capabilities are and so on. So I think that generally speaking, procurement, yes, we're not trying to avoid it, but there are ways that you can minimise the work involved around procurement.
Yeah, it's excellent. A few different options there. Peter, was anything from your experience you wanted to add to that question?
I'm smiling slightly, Paul. I was going to suggest that I will pass on this question because, as an elected member, you tend to decide what you want to do and then make demands upon your staff and the officers to carry it out. But it's around that purposeful investment for Preston. It's around doing, from an elected member's perspective, it's simply around doing the best you possibly can for your residents. And if that is, keeping the wealth within the area, fine. If it's bringing in some, as I said about Balfour Beatty, to then spend their money almost in their procurement terms locally, absolutely, whichever. And as I said, the Preston model has received lots of attention nationally and internationally. It's not something to be scared of. It's around that social value. It's simply around trying to do the best you can for the people of Preston, both from a private parties, private organisations are recognising that and are wanting to be more and more part of that, really. So no, it's not something I would answer technically as the other guys have done so, really.
And when it comes to working with the officers and the different departments to take large projects forward, talk to me a little bit about the sort of the capacity. It's not all about money; it's about skills and bodies and the management time to be able to take these things forward. Is that something that's under increasing pressure, or is that all fine?
There are always checks and balances with anything, but certainly from our perspective, we're willing to explore with anybody and anybody. As I say, we have got some of the big boys in, but certainly there's still opportunities. It's not a closed book by any stretch of the imagination in Preston, and we're quite happy to talk to everybody really, and to give people the opportunity to see what value there is in Preston at the moment, and how best we can help people. I mean, we have. What we tend to try and work through as much as anything is in terms of the Preston Partnership, over 100 private sector organisations within Preston Partnership. It's private sector led, but very much started off with the council sort of motivating that and being the catalyst for that. So that's where the opportunity for a lot of people comes from in terms of talking to each other and then talking to us about the opportunities that are out there in Preston. So certainly in terms of capacity, no, it's much around where those opportunities are within Preston, whether that is land or existing buildings or whatever it might be, in terms of refurb or regeneration. Absolutely no, certainly the capacity is there. Thank you.
Yeah, and Caroline, is that something that you have to wrestle with so many of these sort of large projects that Stockport is cracking on with at the moment? What does the resource picture look like for you?
I think it's a constant challenge, actually, just being able to really keep on top and drive things and be as responsive as we possibly can, because that's what developers, investors, partners are looking for. We have to be there when they're ready to move forward. So I think it is a constant challenge. I think the budget announced years or so ago for is we're expecting. It's a 1-year position. That's taken a little bit of pressure off, although that's not covering all the costs by any means that we've had to absorb in the last 9 months. But I think there is something about prioritisation within councils as well, and fortunately from my point of view within Stockport, our cabinet, our elected members across parties, I think recognise the importance of keeping resource in place to keep everything moving forward, but it is a constant challenge to make sure that, particularly when there's just so many initiatives coming out, and there's a lot to keep on top of in terms of announcements and funding opportunities, and I'm absolutely not whinging about funding opportunities, but it is a challenge to kind of make sure you're putting your best foot forward all the time.
Yeah, I was thinking that there's things like the sort of GM COVID living strategy, of making places sort of secure and future-proofing those, and they're all distractions in a way, aren't they? You have to digest them, you have to respond to them, position yourself. You've obviously had GMSF as a distraction in many ways. Stockport caught in the crossfire there. Yeah, it's. I mean, what would be your advice to developers that are on the other side looking in? Of what is it that you're looking for, and what would you say to them when they they see this complex world inside authorities?
From my perspective, I think Jerry said it really. Understand what local areas are about, and try and develop a relationship and understand priorities. Also, something about kind of putting your money where your mouth is as well, and showing some commitment and investing or acquiring some land. And there are many speculative approaches that each local government officers get about, where have you got sites, tell us about your area. And I think there's something about, well, come and find out, come and find the sites, and you show that commitment, and we'll absolutely and reciprocate. If you've got the same values, you've got the same ambition, but you're also prepared to do stuff, then that is a real got the makings of a real.
John, did you want to come in there?
Exactly the same. Getting the email that says, have you got any funding and have you got any land? To be honest with you, that's just not the conversation we want to have. If somebody, and we're pretty open and pretty accessible, so if somebody wants to come and talk to us to understand where our priorities lie, where our strategic thinking lies, and what they can do, from what strength they can bring from their business into what we're trying to achieve, that's the conversation we want, because that generally leads to a positive outcome. It may run into a few, a bit of headwind with procurement and all that sort of stuff, but generally speaking, if we can see a good outcome for both us and private sector partner, it'll get pushed through.
And just want to talk about one of the sectors where there is a lot of debate about a sort of space race around offices and co-working, of positioning places, towns, some of the secondary centres to have the right provision for office workers in the future, when maybe city centres aren't going to be the back to what they were before. Is that something that you're seeing in terms of the inquiries, and something that you're redesigning when it comes to master plans, in terms of offering the spokes to the hubs, if you like, of the larger centres? Anybody got any thoughts on that, the office market?
I'll start with that one, because we're right in the middle of it at the moment. That's exactly what we're doing. I think, okay, slightly different between a residential offer and somebody who's looking to live somewhere and somebody who's looking to work somewhere. Slightly different, but actually they want it to be a pleasant space. They may only be coming in for 2 or 3 days a week going forward. They may not, we'll see. But that space needs to be attractive. They don't want to go and work in a space that they don't feel comfortable with, particularly if they're not particularly interested in driving. So the one issue we do have at the moment, I think, is getting people's use of public transport back up to speed. Massive challenges in that for bus companies and train companies. But the real key, I think we can deal with the town bit, despite some of the financial headwind it gives us. I think getting people back into towns, not dependent on cars, for us anyway, is a real critical one.
And Jerry, you were going to come in.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you use the terminology hub and spoke, and I always, when I speak to my colleagues in GM, I always remind them that I don't see it that way. I see it more as a planetary system where every town has their own gravitational pull, and we have our own ability to attract investment and create our own ecosystem, as it were. Clearly, we're going to be affected massively by what happens in GM because we're within their gravitational pull. We have to appreciate that, but it isn't a hub and spoke. We don't have to move, in complete synchronicity with the centre of Manchester, for example. So when you kind of get to that position, you then have to apply that in your own locality, don't you? So in Bolton, we see Bolton as the main town centre, obviously, but we've got Farnworth, we've got West Houghton, we've got Horwich, we've got other Little Lever, other district centres, and we've committed to spending £16 million, acting 4 million in each of these centres to act as a catalyst for regeneration of our district centres. So that's about allowing them to flourish and allowing them to become stronger district centres around Bolton town centre. And I think that's great, and I think that we committed to that 2.5 years ago before COVID came along. So in a way, we were basically heading in that direction, and COVID's just given it a big push. But I also think the nature of the schemes that you're developing, and Caroline again hit the nail on the head, where you've got a mixed-use scheme where you've got some really nice public realm. You've also got some residential, office, and a modicum, limited amount, no doubt, of commercial retail space. When you start to put these all in together and you create places within the centre of Bolton, for example, we've got 5 or 6 of these developments, as I said, in their own right, will be places, and they'll have all these constituent parts. Then that starts to become attractive for people because you can live and work and enjoy life close to, within the same kind of district of the town. So creating these districts, I think, will become the kind of the focal point for us for the next few years in the wake of COVID. Towns will have to start looking more at the districts rather than just the centre of the town and sucking everything in. And so, I think we were on that. We were already on that path, fortunately. We need to do probably a bit more around just placemaking within Bolton Town Centre, and making each of these development schemes more capable of being a place for people to live, people to work, people to enjoy themselves at the same time. It's a big challenge, as John said earlier, to try and do that. It's not easy, Peter said as well, but I think that's where we are at the minute. That's what we've got to try and achieve.
Paul, can I just come in now? I mean, certainly we know that there is a demand for Grade A office space in Preston that we're just not fulfilling at the moment. And, as a council, if it comes back to the public-private partnership, that we can't do it on our own. We need other people to be part of that. And if we look at perhaps, the expression about the hub, we're very much hoping that Preston will be a HS2 hub in the future. And certainly then the station gateway area, in conjunction with our other public sector partners, as much as anything in terms of the county council, that will be a real catalyst for that office accommodation. And the comments earlier were right around it can't just be a bland open space, office block any longer. There has to be something else to attract people, and there are 1 or 2 examples of that within Preston. People think they're a bit wacky and weird and whatever else with games and whatever else, but it's part of that attraction to come back into the city centre. And if we can combine that with, I hesitate to use it because it'll show my age, but there used to be a TV advert, work, rest and play, and really that is what the city centres are about, work, rest and play now. Which includes that cultural, which includes that leisure bit, which includes that historic bit, not just around that a retail and a pub. It's got to be a lot more, and the offer has really got to change.
Yeah. Caroline, you're nodding along there.
Yeah, and I was just going to just really back up Peter's point about the role of partnerships in that kind of making sure that we're reading the market, we're flexible enough. And Stockport Exchange, Grade A office space outside the station could not have been delivered without the partnership with Muse. They brought that market understanding, the quality of development, the understanding of that office market, and that was an absolute I think a really good essence of a partnership that's continuing now and going on to the next stage. I think we've got to remain flexible in this space as well around what the future brings, because I think there's, you know, lots of speculation. There might be lots of short-term decisions. I think time will tell how it plays out. What I think is absolutely the case, though, is everything we've talked about the quality of space and the you know, the kind of really putting emphasis on quality and location isn't going to go away. That was the same, though, you know, 12 months ago. In a way, it's just interesting that it's come more to the fore.
Yeah. And let's look at for a minute on the residential side. There's obviously a lot of behavioral change, people looking for more gardens, working from home space. But again, there were pre-existing demographics around all the retiring baby boomer generation, senior living, very, very hot in terms of investment interest. And then you've got modular, the rise of modern methods of construction that could be a solution to the housing crisis of building faster. And there's the talk of the public housing provision coming along, councils doing more direct house building themselves. What is it in each of your organisations that you're looking for, that if you were talking to those on the other side of the fence of talking to the private sector advisors in the audience, what is it that you're looking for when it comes to navigating some of these twists and turns in the housing market at the moment? John, do you want to have a think about that?
Yeah, I can do. Our most pressing problem, I think, is the ability to deliver affordable housing as part of schemes. So Warrington's in an odd place whereby it would be similar to others, I should think, where the viability is not quite there. We can't quite comply with what we want to see as affordable, as well as 106 contributions. But what we do is, even though it might not meet policy 100%, there are good reasons why not. And if those good reasons are reasons we want to see, so for example, we might not get 20% affordable family housing near the town centre, close to the town centre. We'll take 12%, because if we don't, we're not going to get any of it. And that balance between good affordable family housing rather than apartments in the town centre is a good enough reason. So I think that's our most pressing problem. And then again, you balance it with this requirement, well, we want green space. That's going to get largely paid for by developments, 106 contributions. So how do you then marry that off against the affordable provision? So I think it's being pragmatic about those things and having a proper, sensible conversation about, look, we can do this, but we can't do this. And taking that forward to members, explaining it succinctly, and making those recommendations to your planning committee to say, look, it's not quite right, but at the moment we know in the market this is right. Nobody's trying to pull wool over anybody's eyes. This is an honest assessment of this scheme, and it should come forward for those reasons.
Yeah. Anybody else want to have a?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Paul, this is again an area of differentiation, I guess, between different councils, because when Bolton introduced its regeneration plan in 2017, they took a policy decision not to ask for Section 106 contributions within the town centre and not to ask for any affordable housing. So for the last 3 years, Bolton has never been asking developers to provide affordable housing in the town centre or make a Section 106 contribution. And I'm not sure how many developers would have known that unless they're listening today. So there you are. But having said that, it's funny how the world works, because I'm now noticing that many of the schemes that are coming forward in the town centre are actually providing affordable housing. Not because we've asked them to, but because the biggest source of funding in town at the minute is registered providers. And most of the investor developers are trying to forward fund their schemes, and they're doing it through RPs. And RPs, of course, are insisting that a percentage of these schemes are affordable housing. So we're actually going to end up with quite a lot of affordable housing in the town, I suspect, as the funding, more and more of the funding depends on RPs. And so it's kind of strange how things work out, but you know, that is definitely a trend at the minute. Two trends that I've noticed. One is more RPs leading the way in terms of certainly town centre development, and secondly, because it's RPs, a very, very strong reluctance not to do anything more than 5 stories. So apartment blocks. So we've had a couple of schemes now that have got, you know, we had one with 4 apartment blocks, 10 stories, and they've now converted that to townhouses, and the forward funded it all through an RP. Now, from our point of view, townhouses is probably more attractive. It's not the best use of land, in my opinion, you know, in a town centre, but there you are. But it is certainly, you know, it's going to give you a nice, attractive environment. You're going to have gardens and so forth. So from a member's point of view, that's probably preferable. You know, we don't get the same numbers of housing delivery, so it puts our housing delivery numbers under a bit of pressure. So there's always pluses and minuses with these things, but at the end of the day, you know, we end up with schemes built and people occupying them, and there'll be families. It won't be as many apartment, you know, 2-bedroom apartments as were previously planned. There'll be much more family housing. So the end result, by a kind of bit of serendipity, really, if I'm honest, might actually turn out to be really good for Bolton. But you know, the market at the end of the day, I guess what I'm saying, the market at the end of the day determines by and large, you know, what the final outcome is. Despite our policy, you know, the council's policies, at the end of the day, you know, it's the market that to a large extent is going to be funding these, and that's what will determine the nature of your development. So coming back to what Caroline said, you've got to be flexible. You've just got to have that approach to be flexible. You've got to have a really responsive planning department, in my view, which I think ours are, because you've got to be prepared to you know, redo plans and redo applications and turn it around really quickly. And so that kind of flexibility and responsiveness is really important.
Yeah, really interesting. Peter, Caroline, any thoughts on the sort of shifting housing market?
Just to say, really, I mean, yeah, I come under pressure from my colleagues and my political group in terms of, you know, affordable housing in the city centre. And as John said, it can be quite difficult in terms of viability and what developers want to do and how best we can do it. And there is an element of a pragmatic approach there that you have to undertake in a way. Yeah, do we want to see a lot more mixed tenures and you know, more bungalows, more family accommodation in the city centre? Yeah, absolutely. But there's that mix that you have to find. It's a difficult balance, and we'll keep working at it, you know. But we need to keep the city centres alive and keep those school in the city schools alive as well. And those, you know, that family accommodation is just as important. So yeah, difficult job, but we'll keep at it and we'll keep trying.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline.
I think one of the biggest challenges is what housing we can build that is more attractive to an ageing population. So in Stockport, we have a rapidly ageing population, more so than other areas, and we know that everybody just by very nature wants to stay in your own home as long as possible. But in order to do that, the kind of traditional build of family housing doesn't always lend itself to do that. But to actually incentivise an individual or a couple in middle age, not alone old age, to think about of housing choice away from a family house where generations have lived, or you've certainly brought your kids up there, is a massive challenge. And I think we know within the market what instinctively works for younger people, professional people. We've seen that tried and tested model in our cities. We know what traditional family housing looks like. We know what traditional older person's accommodation looks like for kind of, you know, last resort. I think there's a massive middle ground around what could be a really good market opportunity to allow couples who kids have left home to downsize, to think about an end state home that will allow them to live independently for as long as possible, which doesn't feel like you're going on the scrap heap and you're kind of throwing the towel in. And I think that is a real big conundrum for us nationally around housing development and housing market. And you know, I think we've got to think and we've got to stimulate the market. It's not something that policy will dictate, because individuals will spend their money and invest where they want to. But I'm not sure we've cracked that offer and understood what is going to kind of help people to make some of those massive life-changing decisions. But that can massively benefit in a town centre to have a population of older generation, but older generation with disposable income and time to spend in some of our leisure activities. So I think there's a massive market opportunity there. I just don't think we've cracked the product in the right location to evidence it.
Right. Is that something that you're seeing options come through from master planners or any of the parties that you're talking to, Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, we're really keen for ideas. There's a load of, a lot of projects, a lot of discussion, and we're trialing as a council a multi-generational living project where there isn't any public space that's bespoke to a private space to people's homes, but there are distinct spaces within the development to encourage families, older generation to come together and create a bit of a community that can be supported and managed through volunteering. So, there are ideas. I just don't think there's kind of large scale movement in this from any kind of policy or market shaper. Yeah.
Well, good luck with pushing that forward. It sounds like a very exciting proposition that you make there. We'll draw things to a close there. Thank you everybody for your contribution. A really interesting panel. Thanks again for giving your time and input. So that marks the end of our conference season. Thank you for joining us. We've delivered 15 events on Remo in 4 months after rescheduling our calendar for understandable reasons. Thanks to all who spoke and attended. We'll be back in January with the Healthcare and Senior Living Conference. Check the website for details. We've also got tomorrow's Christmas party from 2 till 4. Join us for that. You can register online this afternoon, and that's free to attend. Otherwise, thank you for joining us today. I hope you found that useful and informative. I'll see you in the other room, and we'll keep that open for networking for another half hour. Thank you, everybody.